Hello, welcome to this recording with myself. I'm Nick Rishwain. I'm here with Guy DiMartino today, a friend of mine and a lawyer out of Florida and Indiana. And Guy does several different areas of practice, one of which is jail, what I'll call jail healthcare or correctional healthcare issues. And Guy, you reached out to me earlier this week, I think over the holiday, and you had told me about this Texas woman who had died in a jail, county jail outside of Reno, Nevada, a small county outside Reno, Nevada. I've been writing about the opioid crisis from an expert witness perspective for several months now, almost a year, and I've done several different blog posts on this topic with addiction and pain management experts, and there's a variety of litigation going on around this. But what you're seeing, and in fact, just recently, I wrote about the CDC saying that there were 72,000 deaths estimated for 2017 related to opioid overdose. And the story that you sent me, knowing that I'm concerned about this issue, the story you sent me was about a woman who was detained in this county jail who, for essentially having some unpaid tickets, some unpaid parking tickets, and I think it just was she was speeding and had some other tickets that were unpaid. She's put in the county jail for 72 hours. She warns the jailers, "Hey, I'm detoxing from some heroin use or opioid use, and I have seizures when I'm in withdrawal." And she was neglected for at least 72 hours, got sick, told them again she clearly was sick all over her cell. There is video of this. You've seen this more in the aftermath of this than I've ever experienced, Guy. I see it as what we're seeing reported in the news, such as this one that you shared with me. Did I summarize that well? And have you seen this type of failure in county jails in your practice? Let's start with that. You
Yes,
probably
there's a typical pattern that you'll see. So I think the facts you laid out, and it's sort of sad. It's not like you had a hardened criminal here. You had a young woman, 27 years old, who came into life doing the right things. She had surgery when she was a teenager, and that's a lot of times that leads folks down the road to a substance abuse problem.
right.
So this, girl had a substance abuse problem. She had problems with drugs and depression. And you're talking about somebody with unpaid tickets. So she stopped and she's detained and she goes into the jail. What I've seen over the years, a lot of times jails are very similar to nursing homes and things like that. The folks who work there become very institutionalized. And that's part of the issue. Now we don't know we only know what's been reported in the news, and
Correct.
so we don't know the ins and outs facts. But I've been involved in a number of these cases over the years on both sides of the coin, defending them and going ahead and prosecuting them. And this is what I see a lot of times. Jailers or prison guards or other folks in institutions, they start to get tunnel vision,
Hmm.
and they start to believe that the folks there are playing them, and that everybody has a tendency to be a liar because it's not comfortable to be in jail.
Right.
But in my experience, people who are addicts or people who are alcoholics, these folks know what happens when they withdraw. And when they go and present and tell somebody that they are withdrawing, you need to take that as gospel because they know better. For every out of every 10 people, 2 people are going to be pulling a wool over your eyes, but 8 of them are going to be right. So this girl, when at the initial intake, at first she wouldn't give them a medical history,
Right.
but then she gives them a medical history when she realizes she's not going to bond out. She gives them a medical history and says, "Hey, I go through seizures when I withdraw." That is the first bell that needs to be rung. At that
Right.
point in time, you read in the newspapers articles, and most jails have some type of protocols, or their state protocols or prison protocols that say if somebody is at risk of seizures, they have to be medically cleared.
Okay.
She
And
wasn't.
this is at usually with an addict. In my understanding, she's essentially saying that she's a daily user. If she says I'm going to go into withdrawal and I have seizures, she's saying I used some today before you guys took me into custody. Would be the indication there, because if there's a risk of I'm going to be here for several days, I'm going to go into withdrawal, and then when I go into withdrawal, I'm going to have a seizure.
Right.
Okay, she's concerned about this.
Right, and that's what you see. They know, folks who have gone through withdrawal, they know, where in the spectrum they're going to start seizing. I have another matter that I'm involved at where, this kid was taking drugs, and he goes up to the guards multiple times and said, "Look, I am detoxing, I am withdrawing, I am going to start seizing." It took him 12 hours or 14 or 16 hours to book the kid. He's still waiting to get booked. He goes up there 3 or 4 times, tells the guards this, and then he seizes, and he does, plants on his face, and just all this, rigmarole and all these injuries because folks. So that's something, and it's, opioids and drugs are bad, but alcohol is worse.
Mm-hmm.
So here we have the first bell that's wrong, and the first thing that you have to look at. Now let's step back a little bit just for a moment to give folks an understanding, because this is important. And we are in a crisis now.
Yeah.
We are in a crisis now.
Have been for several
right.
years. Yeah.
Opioids, alcohol, they are CNS depressants. So people might be saying, what's the CNS? That is the brain and the spinal cord, the central nervous system.
Right.
They depress the central nervous system, but what they do is they work on the receptors in the brain, which are GABA receptors, gamma aminobutyric acid. Big word, GABA. Okay. So when you get CNS suppression, it impacts your breathing centers, because part of the autonomic nervous system, or the automatic nervous system, it really comes in 3 flavors: the brain, the spinal cord, the autonomic nervous system, right? That system controls the heart, controls the lungs, controls the sweating, controls those sympathetic and parasympathetic responses.
Okay.
So we need to understand that, because those are the signs and symptoms that people are going to show.
Okay.
So
the sweating is the one that would stand out in my mind that I've seen.
Right.
Right.
So what that is, that's a sympathetic response. That's the autonomic nervous system. That's autonomic control.
Right. Okay.
The agitation.
Okay.
Okay. The increased heart rate, the tachycardia.
Okay.
Heart rate increase. Blood pressure changes. That's why you want to take their vitals and monitor their vitals.
Gotcha.
Tremors. The hand tremors.
Gotcha.
They can start going into auditory hallucinations where they start hearing things. Visual hallucinations. But there's a reason why those symptoms happen, and that's because of the autonomic control.
Okay.
So when we look at this girl's story, she's there, she starts showing signs on the video of agitation, of sweating, she sort of has periods where she's under the covers and she's catatonic, she's curled up and burled. She had no strength to get up. She asks for help. She tells them multiple times that I'm going to start seizing. She knows she's been there.
Been there for 3 days now.
But she's been there before. I mean, not to the jail, but she's been down that road.
What I understand is commonly referred to as dope sick.
Right, exactly.
Because she's not getting what she needs and she's now sick.
Right. So, the jailer in this case, according to the paper, says, "Oh, I'm not going to take you to the hospital. You're detoxing. It's uncomfortable. Deal with it."
Yeah.
So here you have a jailer that's doing this. No medical staff there to review. Nobody who you'd really trust, to check her vital signs. Things along those lines. Right. And so then she starts vomiting. And vomiting and nausea is another sign that there's something going on here. So you don't only have to worry about, so you have somebody that didn't eat, didn't drink, is vomiting. Drugs and alcohol in and of themselves have the fact to dehydrate you.
Mm-hmm. And she's not taking any liquids or eating any food. No,
and so then when you become dehydrated, what does that do to your vitamins and minerals? What does it do to your minerals? What does it do to your sodium? What does it do to your potassium? What does it do to your calcium?
Everything's got to be depleted, right?
Of course. And so then she starts with partial seizures on the video. Yeah. And if they, she was in a video room for monitoring, and it really didn't monitor. So you have a failure to monitor,
right.
Case. And then she goes, she's vomiting, and there's an issue about he makes her go ahead and mop it up, and she can't even stand up to mop it up. So she's showing weakness.
Mm-hmm.
So here you have all the signs of somebody who's going into withdrawals.
And I would have said the weakness, Guy, in looking at the video that I saw, I would have said the weakness was apparent earlier than the vomiting, because she appears to be just covered at all times and lying on the bed, as in she doesn't have strength to get up.
Right. So I mean, and this is what I see in withdrawal death cases all the time. You have somebody who's, and a lot of times the jailers or the guards or other people in other institutions, they just become part of the system. And, they become hardened because they hear the same thing over and over and over. And they start, and 9 times out of 10, somebody's going to go through detox and they're not going to die.
Right. And this, in playing devil's advocate here, this jailer sees a fairly healthy-looking young woman.
Of course.
Right? 27 years old. But they have that added knowledge that she has a seizure issue when she detoxes.
Right. And so, but that was sort of put on the back page. So, what do you do? What do you do with these folks? I'll tell you, so the standard.
Tell us, please.
The standard is this. You make sure they're hydrated. You get them checked out. You check their vitals. You want to make sure that their respiration rate doesn't change. Remember, because it's a CNS depressant. You want to make sure that their respiration rate stays within the normal range, right?
Okay.
You want to make sure their heart rate doesn't go up the roof. Because what happens when you're not pumped, well, because of the autonomic nervous system controls the heart, but when you start to dehydrate, you don't have the same blood volume. So your heart rate increases in order to get the blood out to the rest of the body.
Gotcha.
So that's sort of, what's going on. So
gotcha.
You check their vitals. You hydrate them. You possibly put them on a benzodiazepine, an Ativan, a medication that's going to clear up some of those receptors so things start to function better in the brain.
Okay.
You know what I mean? You do constant monitoring. And if based on other symptoms, if there's a lot of agitation, you might want to give them a different medicine. If the benzodiazepine isn't working and you start to see them going into pseudo seizures, you might add some medications like propofol, which you can't do in a jail, obviously. Or, some folks need to be on IVs. They need some folks, some places will use ketamine to get them past this crisis. Because it is a crisis, and it's even worse with alcohol. I mean, because people, the end stage is delirium tremens, and they die. It's very dangerous.
Very dangerous.
You can have this hardened 75-year-old alcoholic who comes in, and if he tells you, I'm going to detox, you take that to the bank. He's going to start, he's going to start detoxing. And he could detox, and he can go into withdrawals, and he can go into the DTs.
In seizure with alcohol detox, seizure is rather common, is it not?
Yes. Well, yeah, but we're seeing at one time they said alcohol was so much more dangerous than opiates. But we're seeing such a high prevalence of opiates, and we're seeing these different heroines that are just so strong and cut with so many different things that we're seeing that now the opiate problem is also very, very severe. So so that's what we see. And I know that we're looking at this secondhand, and I'm not here to criticize anybody. This is a public health awareness thing.
That's right.
Because a 27-year-old girl should not have lost her life because of speeding tickets.
Correct.
When you just look at it like that.
So, Guy, tell us this. When I used to have clients in the San Joaquin County Jail as a conservator, and I'd go down there and I'd visit them, and there we have a large enough jail that there is a nurse's station there. I'm not sure that it would be the kind of care that I would want, but at least there's some basic form of care there. What would be what would be the gold standard for treatment in this situation? She comes in. This jail is saying, look, we're a small county jail with 4,500. Our county has 4,500 people. We don't have. I still think they could have picked up the phone and called an ambulance. I don't think that is part of their staff shortage problem or anything like that. But what is the gold standard of reaction in this particular situation?
So, you're not required in a jail or prison to provide people with gold standard.
Right.
She probably, it's a small county. She probably didn't see a judicial officer. So if you're looking at on a constitutional basis, it's the it's the objective reasonable or objectively unreasonable standard under the Fourth Amendment. If she saw a judicial officer, then it would be a 14th Amendment claim, which would be a pseudo deliberate indifference. But now you're in the Ninth. That's in the Ninth Circuit.
Or Ninth Circuit.
Now that's also potentially more of a Fourth Amendment standard based on some recent rulings. So. You're required.
Nevertheless, just for the viewer who's out there, rather than the more legal, what would be the appropriate standard for a jail to consider?
What I would want for my family member?
Yes.
I would want their vitals checked. If they said that they seized, the hospital was across the street in this case, I would have wanted her to go to the hospital and get cleared. They might have put her on an IV bag. They might have given her some fluids. They would have probably started her on some type of cocktail, maybe Ativan or some type of cocktail, and they would have had her monitored. They probably could have sent her back and said, we want you to report the vitals to us every hour or every 2 hours or every 4 hours. And if there's a significant change in condition, like if she starts vomiting, if she's showing signs of dehydration, bring her back immediately. That's what you would have wanted. You would have wanted her to touch base with some medical professional, whether it's an RN, an LPN, somebody. You just can't put that on a jailer. You can't,
Right.
you can't put that on a correctional person. How are
Right.
they, they have so many things they have to do. They have to worry about safety. They have to worry about, getting people food. They can't handle healthcare either. The system is
Right.
just, taxed.
Taxed, and generally they have other inmates that they're responsible for. So you can't focus entirely on the one who's having a medical issue, which would indicate let's get this person to somewhere where we can
But the other
have
issue
them
is,
medically.
you start referring these people out and you become a triage center for the hospital. You're in a small county of 4,500 people. How does it get paid for?
Zero.
So corrections in and of itself, they really have a tough, they really have a tough thing. People who think that it's never going to happen to them or never going to happen to their family member, they don't want their taxes going up, or they don't want, something going on for the people who are doing something bad until so they don't want to give money to that. They don't want to appropriate funds to that unless
Right.
it's somebody that actually touches their heart.
Right.
So it's really a difficult situation for everybody. And this is just tragic, but we're seeing this so much throughout the United States.
We now know the opiate deaths or opioid related deaths are outranking car accident related deaths and gun related deaths in the United States. So jails really are. And in my experience in government was that government is unlimited problems with limited resources. But that's what it's about. And I think you and I had a conversation similar to this a year ago, where we discussed about the resources, or the lack of resources to address some of these issues. But when there is a red flag, it sounds like in this case, to kind of wrap it up, it sounds like there's a red flag. She's aware, she's got a problem, she's aware that she has a medical issue related to her drug problem, and that's the red flag that should go up and tell the jailers, okay, well, we need to have her medically cleared before we continue to hold her.
Yeah, so you always in healthcare, you always say, you want a differential diagnosis. You take somebody's symptoms, you put the potential most dangerous things at the top of the list, and then one by one you start ruling them out. You got a fat 50-year-old like me that smokes and blah 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 blah, which I don't, and I'm coming in with chest pain. The first thing you're going to think is, hey, let's rule out that he's not going to have a heart attack. If
Right.
you know what I mean, if the EKG and the enzymes are correct, then the next thing you're going to say is, hey, maybe he has a pulmonary embolism. Let's check
Hmm.
that. And then finally, you're going to go down the list and you're going to say, oh, you just have indigestion. You're not going
Right.
to jump to the indigestion. And
Right.
when you have somebody who's coming in this scenario who says, look, I seize when I withdraw, I have a problem and I withdraw, she is somebody who's going to seize until it's proven otherwise.
Right.
And that's
Because she's obviously had this instance before.
right. She's
She
been there.
hasn't she hasn't been through the, well, I get sick and I throw up and then it goes away after a few days. It is, I
Right.
get sick and I have a seizure. Yeah.
Yep. So it's all
Yeah.
about awareness, my friend.
It is. I'll keep writing about it and we'll keep talking about it
And we'll keep
because,
chatting about it. Maybe we'll touch
yeah,
somebody.
maybe somebody will have maybe it'll impact somebody and make them, a little more willing to get some help or to get somebody they know to get the help that they need.
So again, Nick, you and I, we don't know all the facts of this case, and we're not, pointing fingers at anybody. We're just talking about stuff that's out there and trying to give some public awareness
Yeah.
to what's going on. I feel for both sides because
Yeah.
I see the struggles that both sides have.
It's a real problem. It's a real difficulty. I don't want to point fingers. I keep writing about it as a as it relates to my business with expert witnesses and as a public service announcement because it's a huge problem.
All the deputies and law enforcement in our area now are
Hmm.
Narcan trained because
Are
of the
they?
opioid. Yep. So
Yep.
you want to talk about that's another. You have somebody who's in law enforcement. They make $40,000 a year, and now they're required to do emergency medical care in the field to
Yep.
stop somebody from dying. But I'm in a small county right here, and they've prevented a number of deaths this year. So it's all about awareness and training.
It is, and I know that there's a huge push nationally, many counties who are suffering from it to get that Narcan more easily distributed and even more readily available at your local pharmacies that you can get it over the counter. There's a big push for that kind of thing because it's become such an issue.
Yep, yep.
Yeah.
Anything
All
that you
right.
and I can do to help.
That's it. Reach out to us.
Yep.
All right, Guy. Thank you for
Thank you.
the show.
Have a great day.
You too.